Hi guys, it's Dave. I just wanted to show you guys a quick 5-minute video to help sharpen your breadboarding skills because I noticed I was saying the same thing a bunch of times, and I think it'd be more clear if I just show you. If you're putting a chip like this on the board with the 3 legs, having said that, the last thing you want to do is something like this, because you're electrically connecting every single leg together. So you want to put a chip like this. This is a TO220 package on the board so that each foot gets its own row. So another thing people find a little confusing are these momentary switches, and I get why, because to the untrained eye they just look like they're symmetrical, but they're actually not. Have a close look. So on this side of the switch, the 2 legs are attached to the square face, whereas if I rotate it, there's no leads going out of that face, it's just a blank square. And so the way that these switch are, when you press the button, it's the leads on the adjacent side that are switched on and off. Whereas if I rotate this, on that blank face, those 2 opposite feet are always electrically connected whether you press the button down or not. So the proper placement when we press the button, if we're going to have the switch connect, is to put this down so that those adjacent leads are on different rows. So I'm going to press down, and you can see that now when I press it down, row 23 and 25 are electrically connected, whereas when I let go, row 23 and 25 are now apart. So that's how you would use it. The biggest mistake that people make, and you have a 50-50 chance, is using it this way. So when you put it down on the board this way, oh, it's even hard to do. When I put it down on the board this way, the switch won't do anything. I've just said when I press it down, row 24 is connected to 24, and row 21 is connected to 21. So that switch is doing nothing. So make sure that the spider's head is looking along the board like this. See? So that's the correct way to use a switch. Some people had problems putting our voltage divider together, and so I wanted to take you through it just in a very quick but easy-ish sort of way. So my first point I'm going to make is that you don't have to be so literal with circuit diagrams. So a circuit diagram is an idea of how everything's electrically connected, but you don't actually have to put literally everything in the same spot as you see in the diagram. In fact, usually you wouldn't. You want to use as few components as possible because that leads to fewer mistakes. And also, like for instance, see how everything converges to that point, which is connected in this diagram, and then goes to ground? You don't actually have to do that. You can just go right to ground here from that capacitor, right to ground here, and right to ground here. It's just drawn like that to show that all roads lead to Rome. Rome in this case is ground. So let's put this circuit together in a simple and minimalist idea of number of components, and we're going to highlight things as we go along. So I've put the chip in the corner because it's going to power other things. So I'm not going to work in the middle. I'm going to leave myself lots of nice room to make other circuits. And so the first thing we usually think about is providing power to the chip. So I look at the diagram, and it looks like 9 volts goes into pin 3. So let's do that now. I'm just going to take a staple, and then pin 3 is going to get 9 volts. Sorry. There we go. So you're going to use staples whenever you can, just because it makes things simpler and less things pop out of the board at you, and it's much easier to visually troubleshoot. Now, in the lab book, I'm just going to take a highlighter and color off that I've done this, and this will help me keep track of what I've done because it can get very confusing with more difficult circuit diagrams. So the next thing I'm going to do is look at this capacitor here. I guess we're working our way down, and this is a 0.1 microfarad capacitor, and we just want that to hook up to ground. So we don't have to be so literal here. We don't have to make all of these leads meet and then go to ground. So we're just going to go directly to ground. That's what those rails are for. So I'm going to put C1 from the 9 volt lead, which doesn't have to go right from the chip because it's electrically connected to the chip now, right into ground. So let's do that. There, so see what I've done now? I've put the capacitor from the 9 volt lead right to ground, and that's also connected to pin 3. So I didn't have to be so literal and connect it right in the same row. In general, you want the capacitors to be as close to the chips as possible, and that will help modulate it'll help smooth out ripples. But this is perfectly acceptable, going from pin 3, going from the positive to the negative rail, and over there we've highlighted that off. So the next thing I see is that we have pin 1 here. So we want to go pin 1 to ground through our trim resistor, which is 100K. So let's do that now. Okay, so I'm placing this on the board. So pin 1 of my voltage regulator is going right into that first pin of the trim pot. And we're going to go out the middle so we can make use of the fact that it's a trim, and when you turn it, it's going to change the resistance. If we were just to use the outside leads, then turning would do nothing and it would just be the whole 100K. So I'm going to push that in, and then what I'm going to do on the other side, what I did is hooked up a staple from the middle lead to ground. So we just took care of this lead over here, from 1 going through R2, the trim pot, right to ground. And the next thing I see is I need a resistor from 2 to 1. So this is going to be very easy. So counting from the left is 1, 2, 3. So this resistor here, 240 ohms, is just going to connect pin 2 to 1. So there's a resistor hooking 1 to 2. And you'll notice I haven't used a single jumper wire yet. It's all been staples, and I'm maintaining a nice tight fit in the corner so I could use the rest of the breadboard. Okay, so let's highlight that off, that we've done that. So there's that lead. And then finally, we want C2 to go from pin 2 to ground. And again, you don't have to be literal and have it connect up right with the bottom of R2. Going to ground is just fine. Okay, so I look on my board, and C2's in the middle there, and I've got this capacitor, and really there's no wiggle room to get to ground. So I'm going to use a staple to bring the second leg that way, and then I'm going to connect it to ground from the staple. So this is my first indirect connection. So I'll do that. So there's my connection with the staple going to C2, going over to ground, and we can color that in over here. So here we go, we've done that. There, that's finished. Hey, wait, I think we're done. The only thing we need to do is remember that 2 is the output, and that's what we're going to be measuring from. So why don't we stick a jumper in 2 so we could hook it up to our multimeter and adjust. Okay, so I'm going to put my output right there and have that hooked up to my multimeter. What about the ground wire? So as for the ground wire, so here it is. You can clip to anything that's directly exposed to ground. You don't have to put a wire in or anything like that. And so just to be lazy, I'm going to clip it to this side of the capacitor. There. So it's clipped to the capacitor, and we have our jumper V out. And now the only thing that's left to do is hook up the power. So I have a battery here with the leads, and I'm going to put those in the power. And you'll notice I didn't need the bottom rails, so I didn't bother putting any wires across because I managed to stay on this side of the board. So I'll just hook in the power now. So this is all hooked up now, and the only thing left to do is to twist that little trim so I get 5 volts, and I'll do that right now. There we go, 5.00, and so now you have a way of powering your logic chips or whatever you want to power. Maybe it's a tiny microprocessor chip that runs on 5 volts, and we started with 9 volts, and now we are able to power things. And that's really all there is to it. So you can see I've only used 1 wire, and when I go to my actual circuit, I can get rid of that wire and use a staple to bring the power to my next chain. Or another thing that I can do is use a jumper. Maybe I could use this jumper. I could. There we go. So I can unhook him and put him in the bottom rail. And now, using the bottom rail, that's going to be 5 volts. So that's 9 now, and that's 5. So my whole circuit can run off that bottom rail. So it's nice to have different rails. And you don't have to make the red rail positive, and you can have 2 grounds. You can allocate these whatever you want. The positive and negative is just there if you keep that convention to help you remember what it is. So that's really all I wanted to show you. I find this stuff really fun, but some major ideas to keep in mind. Try to keep it simple. don't try to route things in a fancy way or necessarily follow the diagram. And I think the most value is just highlighting things as you go along, because highlighting doesn't destroy the original image. You can see what you've done. You can have a few highlighter colors if you want to go and troubleshoot. And then for troubleshooting, you go with your multimeter and see, is this really, like, is this voltage? You can find out where your circuit is failing, and that's how you can very quickly see, oh, there's a wire that's not working, or maybe your chip is dead, or maybe the power connection isn't good. So, see you guys soon, and yeah, have fun.